is that child that worries you the most? Is that child or those 2 or 3 children perhaps that you're at the end of your school day, you're really worried that you haven't been able to meet their needs?
So would you like to start off by introducing who you are, what you do in your role?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Georgiana Koyama. I'm a board certified behaviour analyst. And there aren't that many of us in this country, actually. I think there's almost about 500 of us. But I specialise in assessments and interventions for children with a variety of developmental delays, namely autism, but also ADHD, pathological demand avoidance. I know the jury's still out on whether that is or is not a thing. And of course, the growing number of children now who actually don't have a diagnosis as such, but fall under the social, emotional, mental health needs. So I've been working in the field now for 17 years, which I just can't believe, to be honest with you.
Flies by, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like you blink. How did that happen?
I started off, as most people do actually, so I was doing my psychology undergraduate degree and was just trying to get a flavour of the sort of work that I'd like to get into. And I gained some work experience working with children with autism, and just I guess found my career calling in a way. I was quite lucky to find that quite early on. So in my 17-year career, I've worked in mainstream schools, as well as special educational needs schools, supporting teachers and parents with children who have behavioural difficulties. I've also worked with adults with learning disabilities and mental health in inpatient settings as well as community-based settings. So I'm sort of a mixed bag, I think. Wherever there are people experiencing difficult behaviours is where I'm usually found, and where I like to help.
They'll see your face somewhere in the mix then.
Yeah, exactly. I set up my own company, All Behaviour Consultancy, 9 years ago, and it was actually, I think, as most women find themselves, actually, you have a baby and then all of a sudden you have other options to make about your career, trying to just get the whole work balance thing right. And I think no matter what occupation you're in, women have to, juggle that childcare needs quite heavily. So I kind of started my own company just out of the basis of just wanting a bit more flexibility with when and how I could work. But B, actually, over the years, I'd gained such a broad range of working with, children with different needs, working in mainstream schools, special needs schools, working with NHS local authority, that I felt like I just wanted that flexibility to continue to work with different children and adults in different arenas. So that's kind of how my company started. It wasn't supposed to be around this long. I thought it was going to tide me over my maternity, and then here we are.
Well, I mean, that sounds like quite a journey, and it sounds like a beautiful journey, and it's brought you here, so we've got to meet. So you touched upon about supporting children with social, emotional difficulties. So, say in layman's terms,
yeah,
what would you describe a child that has social emotional difficulties?
Yeah, I think in layman's terms, it really depends on what is underpinning those difficulties and what that could look like. So for some children, it could be like language delays. For some children, it could look like inattention. For some children, it could look like screaming and shouting. It could look like challenging behaviours in the classroom, a child that's not either putting their hand up or not responding, a child who teachers feel like, they're quite children who need extra attention, I'd say. And I think for the range of that can look so different. For example, working in a school at the moment where there's a child there with selective mutism. So you can tell, even though he can sit down and write and engage in tasks, that actually that's the area that he most struggles with. So I think the social and emotional health really is dependent on that child's presentation when compared to peers, but also that child's presentation for their own development and perhaps for their history, where they're coming from. So it can be anything from language, social communication delays, to big behavioural issues such as screaming in class, running around the school, hitting, kicking others. And of course, for other children, it could look like academic delays as well, where maybe they're just not really able to access the curriculum according to their chronological age. So you might get a child in year 3 or year 4, but is needed work differentiated at a reception level.
It sounds so broad in terms of, thank God for people like you that specialise in it, because I'm just listening to you, and me too. I've had about 17 years within the profession, and I have to say, even after 17 years, I couldn't say if I was confident enough to say that child specifically has social emotional difficulties. I think it's such a hard thing to, I don't know if this is the right terminology to use, but to diagnose.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of teachers, particularly if they're entering the profession now, it's very, very daunting, and especially if they're faced with children with social emotional difficulties, whether that be elective mutism, which can be sometimes equally as challenging as someone that does run around the school
screaming and shouting. Exactly.
Shouting. The two are very, very different ends of the spectrum almost, but equally as challenging. So say I was entering the profession, or not just entering the profession, I think all teachers need to hear your experience and your advice, but what would you say to teachers in terms of giving them tips and advice, just so that they could manage it until they could perhaps get the right support in? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's an element of they can't do it all on their own.
Absolutely.
In the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they do need further outside support.
Yeah.
So what would you say, just say in their little bubble in their classroom, what advice would you say to them to just give them those little tools that they can get through the day?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think having spent quite a lot of time in the classroom, particularly for newly qualified teachers, I think is that child that worries you the most? Is that child, or those 2 or 3 children perhaps, that you're at the end of your school day, you're really worried that you haven't been able to meet their needs? Is that child that you just feel that you just can't get through to, the one that you're up all night trying to do your planning, or the one that causes you, there are a few children that that causes you that bit of anxiety, as in there's something I just don't know how to reach that child. And I think it's really about teachers tapping into that when they're finding a child or a group of pupils in their class particularly difficult, for them to actually reflect on their training, on their teacher training, actually, in terms of, was I actually prepared for this? Is this the sort of role that I was coming into? Are the demands being created in order to meet this child needs? Am I suitably prepared for that? And I think take self-doubt away. I think a lot of teachers can answer that very clear cut for about 27, 26 of their 30 children in the class. They can definitely go, yep. But I think it's those children. And for those children, the best thing is that teachers need to flag up that children need help much earlier than they're doing. I think there's a lot of teachers perhaps thinking that they are doing something wrong, or that they can do something more. And I think once they're going through that problem solving, trying to identify, I think that's when help needs to be called sooner rather than later. Because the thing is, there's such a long waiting list for everything at the moment that you could easily let a term or 2 go by before you're reaching out for help. So I think for me, that's the first thing I'd advise teachers to just tap into, what their training prepared them for, tap into how they're feeling about particular children in terms of they're able to meet their needs or not. Beyond that, I think trying to build rapport with children as well is really, really important. And it sounds like one of those, I think it can sound like a bit of a broken record. It's really important to build rapport with the kids. And then on the other hand is, do you know how much time I've got? And I'm going to sit around and bake cakes with everyone. But you know what? It can be tiny little things like just trying to know their pet's name, for example. So it doesn't have to be big things, but quick connections that it's you've got that with that pupil. Because a lot of children that have social, emotional, behavioral disorders or developmental delays, one of the big key factors there is actually just how comfortable, how welcomed do they feel in a space, and how well they feel that they can fit in themselves. So I think with teachers building rapport, that's definitely a key thing. And I think another thing is teachers trying is the word there. You got 30 kids to deal with, but really trying to be proactive in their approach. I think after a while with a particular class, whether it be 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I think teachers really get to identify where those hot spots are. And I think rather than dealing with those hotspots proactively, I think we're all trying to move away from, okay, so what do we do after he does that, to actually what should we be doing to make sure that he or she doesn't get into that, or which part of my planning, so which part of my planning is really going to focus on that hot spot is after lunch. Okay, there's going to be the 1 or 2 kid that after lunch 30 that after lunch, that's going to be the hot spot, or before lunch. So it's about thinking, well, actually, what lessons do we need to put into that period of time? Is there opportunities for sensory breaks? Is this more of a period of time where children need to chit chat? Because let's face it, they're going to chit chat anyway. But rather than me being like, it's not time to talk, why don't I create an activity that actually is meeting the pupil's needs then? Does that? They're long points, but I can summarize.
I think they're also so key. They're so important. The thing that really struck with me is what you said at the beginning, where you said, reflect on your own training. Has your own training prepared you for every single child in your class? And I think it's almost like a cultural change we have to create within a school, because, as you said, there is that kind of feeling of, right, I'm now a qualified teacher, I should be able to handle and manage all 30 children in the classroom, and I'm a failure if I don't. And from what I'm guessing from what you're saying is that you're saying that no, we need to let go of that. You're not a failure. Seek the support, seek the help, and I think that's such a key message. I think I'm going to take away from this meeting and shout out about is that, because I think that's definitely something we need to bring about in all schools. So thank you.
Thank you. So I think sometimes, there's a lot of children that we work with that challenge us, but that is our bread and butter. That is what we do. We work with pupils with behaviours that challenge. So if they challenge us, then you can only imagine what that does to a teacher who's actually maybe done a module or so in behaviour management.
Exactly.
We've gone as far as getting a master's in this stuff and above, and we still get those children. So I think teachers definitely need to at times just give themselves a break. I think lower their own expectations and just draw in support.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable and useful. In the comment box below, please put a question or a comment about the video. To grow our community more and help other teachers out there, please subscribe to the channel and share our posts and videos. Thank you.